Someone you love is going to die. You already know this. You've known it for years, somewhere in the back of your mind, in the place where you keep the thoughts you don't look at directly. One day, the person you can't imagine living without will simply stop breathing, and you will be left standing in a room that is suddenly too quiet, holding grief you have no idea what to do with. Here's the thing that should comfort you, even though it sounds like it shouldn't. That exact moment, that specific unbearable ache, is not new. It is not modern. A human being stood exactly where you will stand 100,000 years ago, looking down at a body that used to be a person they loved, feeling the same thing you are going to feel. And what they did next is one of the most important things our species has ever done. This is the story of what ancient humans did with their dead. Not the pharaohs, not the pyramids, not the elaborate tombs you've seen in documentaries. We're going much further back than that, to before writing, before farming, before religion had a name, back to the very first time a human being refused to simply walk away from a body. Because here's the question that sits underneath all of this, the one nobody really asks. When did we start to care? When did death stop being just an event that happened, the way it happens to every animal, and start being something a human being could not bear to ignore? When did grief begin? Let's start with what makes this question so strange in the first place. In the natural world, death is simply abandonment. When an animal dies, the herd moves on. The body is left where it falls. There is no ceremony, no pause, no looking back. This isn't cruelty, it's survival. A dead body is dangerous. It attracts predators. It carries disease. Every instinct an animal has says the same thing: get away from it, and stay alive. And for most of life on Earth, that was the only rule. The dead were left behind. But somewhere, at some point, a creature that would eventually become you did something no animal had ever done. They looked at a dead body, and instead of walking away, they stayed. They did something with it. They cared. That single decision is so significant that archaeologists treat it as one of the dividing lines between an animal and a human. Because to bury someone, to deliberately place a body, to mark it, to grieve over it, you need something extraordinary happening inside your head. You need to understand that the person is gone. You need to feel the loss of them, and you need, somehow, to believe that the moment matters. That's not instinct. That's the beginning of being human. So when did it start? For that, we have to go into the ground. The first piece of evidence takes us to a cave in the mountains of what is now Iraq, a place called Shanidar. In this cave, archaeologists found the remains of several Neanderthals. And Neanderthals, remember, weren't even us. They were a different kind of human, a separate branch, the ones we tend to imagine as the dumb brutes of the ancient world. That image is about to fall apart. Because when researchers examined the soil around one of these Neanderthal bodies, they found something that stopped them cold: pollen. Clusters of pollen from flowers, concentrated around the body, in a pattern that doesn't happen by accident. The interpretation that emerged was breathtaking. Someone may have laid this person to rest on a bed of flowers. Someone gathered blooms by hand and placed them around a body that could no longer see them, could no longer thank them, could do nothing in return. Now, scientists still argue about Shanidar. Some think the pollen was carried in by burrowing animals. That's fair, and we'll come back to how careful we have to be here. But the body itself was deliberately positioned. This was not a corpse left where it fell. A Neanderthal, tens of thousands of years ago, was placed, cared for, not abandoned. And Shanidar is not alone. Travel to Russia, to a site called Sunghir. Here, archaeologists uncovered graves so elaborate they're almost impossible to comprehend. Bodies covered, head to toe, in thousands upon thousands of beads. Each bead is carved by hand from mammoth ivory. Researchers estimated that making a single one took close to an hour. Do the math on thousands of beads, and you're looking at years of human labor, poured into clothing for the dead. Think about what that means. In a world where every hour was survival, where time was the most precious thing a person had, an entire community spent years of collective effort decorating people who were already gone. They buried 2 children there, side by side, covered in ivory and laid with spears. Nobody does that for a body they don't love. Nobody does that for a death that doesn't matter to them. This is the part that breaks the old story of the brutish, uncaring caveman. These were people with grief so deep that they expressed it in years of work. And there's a third discovery, the strangest of them all, and the most recent. Deep beneath South Africa, there is a cave system called Rising Star. To reach the chamber where the discovery was made, you have to crawl through a passage in the rock barely wide enough for a human body, in total darkness, far from any natural light. And down there, in that nearly unreachable place, researchers found bodies, many of them. Here's what makes this one extraordinary and controversial. The creature found in that chamber, Homo Naledi, had a brain about 1/3 the size of yours. By every assumption we used to hold, something with a brain that small should not be capable of caring for its dead. It should not be able to grasp death at all. And yet the bodies were there, deep in a place that took real effort and real intention to reach. The researchers argued these bodies were deliberately placed. The claim is fiercely debated, and I want to be honest with you about that. Not everyone accepts it, but if it's true, it shatters something we believed about ourselves. It would mean the urge not to abandon our dead is older and deeper than our big, clever brains. It would mean caring for the dead isn't a product of intelligence. It might be something closer to the core of what we are. Now, here's where I have to be straight with you, because this topic demands it. We are reading clues, not reading minds. We cannot dig up a feeling. When archaeologists find a body placed with care, covered in ochre, surrounded by objects, they are looking at the physical shadow of something they cannot directly see, the inner world of a person who died before history began. Some of what I'm telling you is solid, confirmed, and agreed upon. Some of it is careful interpretation that honest experts still argue over. The pollen at Shanidar, the intention at Rising Star, these are debated, and anyone who tells you it's all certain is selling you something. But step back and look at the whole picture, all of it together, and one thing becomes very hard to deny. Again and again, across continents and across hundreds of thousands of years, humans did something with their dead. They didn't walk away. That pattern is real, even when the individual details are fuzzy. So let's talk about what they actually did, because it was not just a burial. Burial is only one answer to the question of the body, and ancient and traditional humans found many. Some placed their dead in the earth, curled on their side as if sleeping, sometimes with food, with tools, with the things they'd need. The clear and aching implication being a belief that the journey wasn't over. Others did the opposite of hiding the body away. In some traditions, the dead were placed high up, on platforms or in trees, given to the sky and the birds rather than the ground. To us, that might sound like neglect. It was the opposite. It was a way of returning a person to the world, of letting them become part of the sky. Some practiced what's called secondary burial, and this one tells you something profound about how much they cared. The body would be left or buried until only the bones remained. And then, sometime later, the community would return, gather the bones, clean them, and rebury or keep them, often together with the bones of others who had died. Grief, in other words, wasn't a single day. It was a relationship that continued long after death. They came back. They tended their dead the way you might tend a grave you still visit, and in some cultures, the most intimate practice of all. The dead were kept close. Sometimes their remains were kept within the community, even worn or carried, so that the person was never fully gone, never fully separated from the people who loved them. Different methods, wildly different from each other, but underneath every single one is the same impulse you carry right now. Don't let them just disappear. Mark that they were here. Do something, because doing nothing is unbearable. Now here is the turn, the thing that reframes this entire story. We tend to think of funerals, of grief rituals, of mourning, as a kind of cultural decoration, something layered on top of being human, invented by religions and traditions, the sort of thing that could be different or could be skipped. But the archaeology suggests the exact opposite. The caring came first. Long before there was a religion to explain death, before there was a word for soul or afterlife or heaven, humans were already refusing to abandon their dead. The feeling came first. The explanations, the gods, the ceremonies, all of that was built later, on top of a grief that was already there. Which means you need to do something when someone dies. To gather, to mark it, to not just move on, is not something your culture taught you. It is something you inherited from a chain of humans stretching back further than you can imagine. It is older than every religion. It is older than your species. It might be one of the very oldest things about you. And that leads to the question I can't stop thinking about. Why? Why would a creature evolve to do this, when it costs so much and returns nothing? A dead body can't help you hunt. Spending years carving beads for a corpse doesn't put food on the fire. By the cold logic of survival, caring for the dead is a waste. Unless the caring was never really about the dead. Maybe it was about the living. Maybe a group of humans who stood together over a loss, who shared the weight of grief, who refused to let one of their own simply vanish, was a group that was bonded more tightly, that trusted each other more deeply, that survived better because of it. Maybe grief is the price of love, and love is the thing that keeps us alive. The same instinct that makes the loss so unbearable is the instinct that made us care for each other enough to survive in the first place. You cannot have one without the other. The ache and the bond are the same thing. So the next time you stand in that too quiet room, holding a grief you don't know what to do with, I want you to remember something. That feeling is not a flaw. It is not a weakness. It is the oldest, deepest, most human thing inside you, handed down through 10,000 generations of people who stood exactly where you're standing and felt exactly what you feel. They placed flowers, They carved ivory for years. They crawled into the dark earth. They came back to tend the bones. Not because it was useful, because the person mattered, because you mattered to someone, and they could not bear to let you go. That is what ancient humans did with their dead. The same thing you will do. The same thing that makes you human. If you found this as moving as I did to put together, take a second and tap the like button. It genuinely helps this type of video reach a wider audience. And if you want to keep going, I've made a video on how ancient humans survived without any medicine at all, which is a truly remarkable feat. You can watch it right here.